Good afternoon, everyone. So Virgo, stop right here. Before we dive into this, I need you to understand something crucial. Someone crying over losing you doesn't mean they've changed. Someone regretting their actions doesn't mean they're capable of different ones. Someone realizing what they had doesn't mean they deserve another chance. So as we talk about what's happening with this person, remember their pain is information, not obligation. Let's be clear about that from the start. People learn slow sometimes. They need to feel absence before they recognize presence. They need to experience loss before they understand value. They need to sit with consequences before they connect behavior to outcome. And this person, this player, this person who kept you in rotation instead of making you priority, this person who treated you like an option while you treated them like choice, they're getting their education now through your absence, through the space you created by refusing to keep accepting less than you deserve, through the silence that replaced whatever dynamic you were maintaining that didn't serve you. And it's teaching them something they apparently couldn't learn while you were still available. Can you feel their energy shifting even from distance? Right, if you're sensing something different in how they're holding you. Because here's what's actually happening in their internal world right now. They're dealing with reality they didn't anticipate. They thought they could keep you in that secondary position indefinitely. Thought you'd keep accepting breadcrumbs because you cared enough to stay regardless of how they showed up. They assumed your patience was infinite. Your tolerance for being treated as backup plan was endless. Your willingness to wait while they explored other options, maintained other connections, refused to commit fully to you. They thought that was just how things were. And maybe for a while it was. Maybe you did stay longer than you should have. Maybe you did accept treatment you knew wasn't right. Maybe you did make excuses for behavior that didn't deserve excusing. But then you stopped. You created boundary. You walked away or created distance or stopped being available in the way you'd been available. And that shift, that withdrawal of your presence, your energy, your willingness to accept secondary status, it's created a void they weren't prepared for. Have you been watching them realize what they lost? Share what you've been observing. Because let me paint the specific picture of what their crying looks like. It's not just sadness, it's regret mixed with disbelief. It's the shock of realizing that actions have consequences they didn't think would apply to them. They're sitting with the emptiness of the space you occupied, noticing all the ways you were present that they took for granted, recognizing patterns of thoughtfulness or care, or understanding that they assumed were standard but are now revealing themselves as specific to you. They're comparing. Every interaction with other people is getting measured against what existed with you, and nothing's hitting the same. Nothing's providing what you provided. Nothing's filling the gap your absence created. They're remembering all the moments they were dismissive or unavailable or treating you as less than. And those memories are landing differently now, with shame instead of entitlement, with recognition instead of obliviousness. They thought they were managing multiple options skillfully, keeping you interested while maintaining freedom to explore elsewhere. Playing the field while having you as safety net. But what they were actually doing was taking for granted someone who deserved to be prioritized. And now that you're not available to be taken for granted anymore, they're learning the difference between having someone and deserving someone. And the lesson hurts. Does knowing they're in pain change how you feel about the situation? Get honest about what's coming up, because I need to address what might be happening in you as you sense this shift. Part of you might feel vindicated, like finally they're understanding what they had. Finally, they're experiencing what it feels like to lose you. Finally, they're getting a taste of the pain their behavior created, and that vindication, it's natural, human, understandable after being treated as second best. But be careful, because vindication can become its own trap. It can make you focus more on their suffering than on your own healing. It can keep you energetically entangled with someone you're supposed to be moving away from. Their pain doesn't heal your pain. Their regret doesn't undo the hurt they caused. Their recognition of your worth doesn't restore what was damaged while they were failing to recognize it. So yes, notice that they're crying. Yes, acknowledge that they're finally seeing clearly, but don't let their current state become more important than your ongoing well-being. Are you using their regret as validation you needed, or are you genuinely moved past needing anything from them? Distinguish between those two very different positions, because let me talk about what happens when players realize they messed up. Sometimes the realization is genuine. Sometimes it catalyzes real change. Sometimes people actually learn from consequences and become capable of showing up differently. But often the crying is just another manipulation, not conscious necessarily, but manipulation nonetheless, because players are good at reading what gets response, and if treating you poorly didn't keep you engaged, if keeping you secondary didn't maintain your investment, then maybe being vulnerable will, maybe showing pain will, maybe expressing regret will draw you back in where previous tactics failed. And I'm not saying their pain isn't real. I'm saying real pain doesn't automatically mean changed behavior. Genuine regret doesn't guarantee capacity for different relationship. So if they reach out and their energy suggests they're building toward it, you need to assess more than their feelings. You need to look at their patterns, their history, their actual demonstrated capacity for sustained change versus temporary performance. Can you commit to that level of discernment even if they're convincing in their distress? Tell me you can actually do that, because here's what you need to understand about your role in this. Their crying doesn't create obligation. Their regret doesn't require your response. They're finally understanding what they lost doesn't mean you have to give them opportunity to appreciate it properly this time. You created distance for a reason. You stopped accepting secondary status because it was hurting you. You walked away or pulled back because staying was costing more than leaving. And those reasons, they're still valid. Their pain doesn't erase the pattern that created your need for distance. Their tears don't undo the behavior that made those tears necessary. So if they come back, if they reach out with newfound appreciation and promises about being different, you get to decide what that means for you, based on your clarity about what you actually need, based on honest assessment of whether they're capable of providing it, based on your own readiness or lack thereof to risk being hurt again, not based on their distress, not based on guilt about their suffering, not based on relief that they finally see you. What do you actually want with this person now that you're not accepting secondary status? Get specific about what would even make reconnection worth considering, because I want to address the player label directly, People who play games, who keep multiple options, who refuse to commit while expecting your devotion, they operate that way for reasons. Sometimes it's immaturity. They literally don't know better. They're operating from models they saw or experienced without having developed awareness about impact. Sometimes it's fear, fear of vulnerability, fear of being fully seen, fear of betting on one person and being wrong. Sometimes it's ego. They like being wanted. They like having options. They like the power dynamic of being pursued while maintaining emotional distance. And sometimes it's just character. Some people are users. Some people are takers. Some people lack capacity for reciprocal partnership regardless of how much they might claim to want it. So their current tears, their recognition that they messed up, it tells you they have some capacity for self-reflection, some ability to connect behavior to consequence. But it doesn't tell you which category they fall into. It doesn't tell you whether they're capable of actual change or just temporarily uncomfortable with losing what they had. Only sustained demonstration over time tells you that. Only watching how they show up when the initial emotion fades tells you that. Which category do you think they actually fall into? Make your assessment based on evidence, not hope, because here's what happens if you take them back based on tears alone. Best case, they've genuinely learned, they show up differently, they prioritize you, they demonstrate through consistent action that they understand what almost lost you and are committed to not repeating those patterns. And if that happens, if their regret translates into actual changed behavior, then maybe reconnection becomes viable. Maybe giving another chance makes sense. But that's best case. And best case requires sustained proof, not just initial promises. More likely case, the tears are real, but the capacity for change isn't there. They're sincere in their regret, but incapable of different behavior. They genuinely want you back, but haven't done the internal work that would allow them to show up differently. So they cry, they promise, they convince you they've changed. You give them another chance. And for a while, it's different. They're attentive, available, making you feel prioritized in ways they didn't before. But then old patterns resurface. The attention fades. The availability becomes inconsistent. The prioritization erodes back into secondary status. Because tears aren't transformation. Regret isn't growth. Wanting to be different isn't the same as being capable of different. Worst case, the tears are performance. Conscious or unconscious manipulation designed to re-engage you, to draw you back into dynamic that serves them more than it serves you. And you fall for it because you want to believe they've changed, because their pain makes you feel guilty, because being wanted even by someone who treated you poorly feels better than not being wanted at all. Which scenario feels most probable for your specific situation? Be ruthless in your honesty, because I need to tell you something you might not want to hear. Even if their tears are genuine, even if their regret is real, even if they've actually learned something from losing you, you still don't owe them anything. You still get to prioritize your peace over their growth. You still get to choose yourself over giving them opportunity to demonstrate whether they've changed. Because here's the truth. You're not a training ground. You're not a practice relationship where someone learns how to treat people properly through trial and error with your heart. If they needed to lose you, to learn to value you, if they needed your absence to recognize your presence, if they needed consequences to connect their behavior to impact, that's their lesson to learn. But you don't have to be the person they practice their newfound awareness on. You can wish them well in their growth and still keep moving forward without them. Does that feel like permission you needed? Take it if you've been feeling guilty about maintaining distance, because ultimately, here's what this comes down to. Someone who treated you as secondary is now dealing with losing you, and that loss is teaching them something, creating pain that might catalyze growth, and you get to decide what their pain means for you. You can feel compassion for their suffering without making it your responsibility to alleviate. You can acknowledge their regret without using it as reason to give another chance. You can recognize that they're learning without needing to be present for their education. Or you can choose to explore whether their recognition of what they lost translates into capacity to show up differently. You can investigate whether tears indicate genuine transformation or just temporary discomfort. Both responses are valid, neither is wrong. They're just different choices based on different assessments of what serves you. So check in, get honest, ask yourself the real questions. Do I want this person back, or do I just want validation that they finally see me? Am I considering reconnection because I believe they've changed, or because their suffering makes me feel powerful? Would letting them back in serve my actual well-being, or would it just recreate old pain in new packaging? Those questions matter. Those questions protect you from making choices from ego or guilt or loneliness instead of from genuine clarity. And whatever you choose based on those answers, choose it fully. Choose it consciously. Choose it knowing that their tears are their experience and your peace is your priority. They're crying, and that might be the beginning of their transformation, but it doesn't have to be the beginning of your reconciliation. Let them cry. Let them learn. Let them sit with the consequences of treating you as second best. And you keep walking forward. You keep choosing yourself. You keep building a life where being anyone's second option isn't even on the table. That's the real win. Not them finally seeing you, but you finally seeing yourself clearly enough to never accept that treatment again from them or anyone else.